None of them. First of all, I have been taking some notes because I think it's important to analyze this. The situation of indigenous people in Latin America is quite different of the situation described in English. Most of the indigenous population are really in war, and they are losing the war. This is reality. In Brazil, we have as many indigenous people like in Brazil, around 400,000 people. I will show you which is current populations, and you will see which is this difference. This is a list. You can see this is in 2006, jointly with Caroline Stephen from the University of London. The Lancet asked us to make a review of indigenous health in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thus, we make it a scanning of all the populations and the system of health in Latin America. This is the current situation in our region. In a region, you know, between the invasion of the barbarians, Europeans are the barbarians. This barbarian invasion that began after Columbus entered in a region was very cruel because we had around 150 million indigenous people. 2 centuries and a half later, we had solely 11 million indigenous people. It fell from 150 million to 11 million, solely in around 2 centuries, mainly for diseases, but also by weapons. And now, in this moment, we have a population of around 75 million indigenous people all over Latin America. This is a small summary, but the reality is that the difference is that most of the cultural diversity disappeared. When we had 150 million indigenous people, it was with a huge diversity of cultures and phenotypes. And now we have 70 millions, but is few, is totally reduced the cultural diversity. It is very important to understand that the curve make it like this. This is time, population.
Sorry? I think it should be the other way.
Oh, okay. You don't understand in the opposite way? This is 150 million, was reduced 11, and now we have this recovery in this moment. That means that in fact during all this period, most of the cultural biodiversity disappeared, not solely people. It was absolutely valuable information about the ecosystem and how to survive disappeared. It's very important to understand that all this process managed by a war that continues nowadays. This war is the war between the long food chains and the short food chains. One of the worst decisions of humans was the discovery of agriculture. Agriculture is the worst decision never taken by humans. This decision was taken 7 times in all the planet. Twice in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the remaining 5 in different parts of the world. This was the beginning of the war. It was around 10,000 years ago till now. During most of the 90% of the time where humans live in the world as hunters and gatherers, more than 90% we use long food chains. That means that we don't use agriculture. We have been living without this kind of strategy. That means that this process is also a mirror of this battle, this war that continues nowadays. In this moment, all the people that is the winners are those that are pushing, particularly industrial agriculture. I will show you what means in this is the group where we worked. This is Misiones province. This is in northeastern Argentina. In this area you have Double T reserve. You found mainly Bia Guarani people. The Bia Guarani people arrived from Amazonia around 3,000, 6,000 years ago. And they live in the Paranaense subtropical forest. Now, in all these provinces, there are solely around 6,000 Bia Guarani people. Solely 6,000. That means that each people that disappear is a little bit of culture that will be never recovered. In this area, this is one of the communities. In fact, I have been called by the community. This community entered in contact with white people in 1995. That means that they have been living inside the forest with a little disturbance from outside. You have the distribution of the community. These 2 small populations, Tecoaimá and Tecoacapibate. You have, this is the territory of the community, this is forest. This area is without forest for being protected from all the menaces of the forest. And you have different territories. One of the main things among indigenous communities is that they have mobile territories. That means that you use a small portion of territory, and when this area is destroyed, you move to a new area. By secondary succession, the forest recover, and you can move. That means that the hunters and gatherers have very small population. They need huge territories, and the solid strategy for surviving is the long food chains. It was without, I insist, without agriculture. Agriculture was added later. And you have, this is territory, and we have the passive territory. That means the big area that they use. A community of around 150 people need around 6,000 or 7,000 hectares for obtaining all the things they need for surviving. This curve that you are looking, this particular one, I don't know the word in English, it's like an hyperbolic asymptote, I don't know when we can translate hyperbolic equilatera. This is a mathematical curve. This is why you are living, you are alive now. This is explain why we are alive now. This curve is the biodiversity of any natural area in India, in Pakistan, Nepal, or in Argentina. Humans are inside, they were never outside, they are inside. And this is dominant species, this is the rare one, and the solely way for surviving is this hyperbola equilatera. We'll speak in Spanish. This hyperbola equilatera is the passport for surviving. Most of the hunters and gatherers developed long food chains that protected the hyperbola equilatera. But when we invented our different food chains, we changed totally. And the war began. This is the two food chains. You have in the top, this is the food chain that was successful during more than 190,000 years. You know that Homo sapiens began in Ethiopia. Ethiopia is a place where we have been born 200,000 years ago. And this was the strategy that was spread all over this distribution all over the world. The Guarani people in the subtropical Paranaense rainforest in Argentina, they use the long food chain. That means that you are using everything. When they called me for organizing the territory, for defining the territory, I worked with them, I lived with them, hunted with them, fishing with them, and we needed to reconstruct the directory of how many species they use. It was impossible. They eaten everything. They used everything. It was centuries of knowledge for managing everything. But 10,000 years ago, this was the invention that we introduced. That means we destroy all the biodiversity in surface, solely the soil remains with a little bit of information, and we have one species, protected species, humans, and we later introduced herbivores for the using of cattle. This is the short food chain. From the beginning, 10,000 years ago, twice in two regions in South America, or Latin America, more precisely, there was a war between this and this. Incas, Aztecs, and Mayas were like the barbarian Europeans that arrived to Latin America. The barbarians entered in Latin America with the short food chain for everything. Is to destroy all into surface, no more germoplasm, no more biodiversity, solely protected species. More than this, they introduced the short food chain, but also with foreign species. Everything was changed. You cut biodiversity and you introduced the short food chain. In South Latin America, before the invasion of the European, it was a war between the Aztecs, the Mayas, and the Incas, because the Mayas, Aztecs, and Incas, they developed their own short food chain. They were the emperor at the moment. They had I told Mr. Bush, if we don't have the states in the future, the Incas maybe will be the state of Latin America, because they were building the basement for the short food chain basin economies. And during this strong fight, this process was victorious, was the more powerful, because they destroyed most of the cultures developing long food chains. This is very important to understand, because this is behind the tragedy of Latin America in this moment. Because the last people that is developing the long food chains that need a strong quantity of information is indigenous population. This is for, you remember, producers, herbivores, C1, C2, decomposers. This means a lot of biodiversity. You have the Hyperbola equilatera here, and you have our short food chains that need pesticides, and you need additive elements for adding to the soil. Because for maintaining low biodiversity, you need to increase strong amounts of pesticide for maintaining this kind of structure. This is, for example, the Guayma territory of 6,000 hectares. This is Paranaense rainforest, and this is territory used by a small population of around 150 to 200 people. That means around 6,000, 7,000 hectares. And in all these places, they use for hunting, and they use also for fishing, particularly for gathering. And the agriculture entered when the contact was done between the local emperors and the foreign invaders. They introduced with local species small amount of agriculture, but very small. It was not industrial one. It was very small surfaces of agriculture, of short food chains. You can see here, this is one of the things that is happening all over Latin America. This is only a sample that we made. This is biodiversity of big trees, 1956 in 2003. This is dominant species in the Hyperbola equilatera. Is all these dominant species. You can see this in 1 hectare, how the total figures were reduced. Even you see the forest seem in good situation, but when you making the measurements, this is not true. You have less and less biodiversity in most of the forests of the world, in most of the natural ecosystems of the world. This was the system that were used by the communities all over Latin America prior to the inner revolution of the short food chain among Aztec, Mayas, and Incas, and the barbarian invasion after Columbus. It was a movement in the forest. Even I have been reconstructing the movement of the community where we worked, and it was very easy to reconstruct the places where they have been living, but you cannot find practically nothing. One of the elements that show you that the culture is successful is that there is no waste. The Coliseum, the big buildings are waste. We don't see as waste, but it is waste. Because the only way for surviving is not to produce cultural waste. The bigger waste is nuclear power plants. Because plutonium-239 is around 240,000 years. It's a building that needs 2,000 240,000 years. But if you walk in this area, they lived, and even it was very difficult to find which was the place that was occupied 1 century ago. 1 century or 2 centuries ago, it was really recovered by the forest. It's very important to understand what is happening. You have Homo sapiens and morphological trends, and particularly our different nervous layers that provided our kind of behavior. And we were successful hunters, gatherers, and fishermen, and it was the Homo sapiens expansion during most of these 200,000 years as long food chain practitioners. We had separated small populations, but particularly we had a more sustainable relationships between leader of the group and the total population. This is a very important thing for understanding the crisis and the collapse of our current societies. Small numbers with small numbers of chiefs. That means that if you have small population and a single chief, you have a good control of the entire society over the leader. But if you have, like in the States, one president of Obama and millions of people, it's very difficult to control in so huge societies. And these huge territories for maintaining this small population was the characteristic of all of these people. And this is the most important thing. They had quasi-clonal information among members of each group. This was the key of the success for surviving, because the total amount of information was distributed all over the community. They had the same information. There was no gender differences. This is no really elites of information. Even the Opiwa, which is the shaman, he has relatively the same information that the remaining members of the group. This was the strategy of indigenous people, not solely in Latin America, it was also in Asia, in Africa, exactly the same. But when entered this totally different strategy, everything changed. And changed drastically. The short food chain entered with a big support, particularly after the discovery of pesticides. It's important to mention that when the short food chain entered, some big thing happened. When you had the first green revolution, you had the first 7 urban revolution, because you had a plus of energy and material that never existed before. For this reason, all the process of short food chain changed drastically a situation that never existed before, the private property. The private property began with urban revolutions. If you have urban revolution, you have this urban revolution because you have a lot of energy and materials, because you are using short food chains. If you have urban people, you have people very lazy that don't work but think. This is one of our problems. People thinking. People thinking design stupidities. We are the result of these stupidities. And people that think stupidities think that they're very intelligent. And they are successful. And they develop this and devotees, that they are more intelligent than a people that use natural plants. It's so strong that now from our countries we are asking experts from the first world for teaching us how to be intelligent and successful. This is a new kind of stupidity. Thus, you have a less sustainable ratio between, you have interesting thing changes. The relationships between one leader and the population, the gap was incredible. You have one only president, prime minister, and corruption on one side. And a lot of people. Impossible to control any kind of leader. How you control Mr. Obama? Impossible. You cannot touch him. If you try to touch him, you go to Guantanamo. This changes everything. Using a thing that comes from genetics. Genetics there is a principle of genetical drift. We used this, we called about the cultural drift. That means that small groups of people take decisions in huge populations without consultation. The possibility of making a good or bad decision is very big. In genetics is you are using non-adaptative characters. In culture is the same. When you have small groups working, deciding for you, they are taking bad decisions. This is why we have bombs in India, atomic bomb in India. Why we have atomic bombs in Israel? Why we have atomic bomb in the States? Because a small group of stupid people thinking by themselves, they decided in the Manhattan Project, even knowing that they had a small possibility working with fission to create a small sun in all the earth, they decided to explode the bomb. Why? Because these relationships, we had small group of leaders using this cultural drift. We had the creation of intermediate leaders, thus increased corruption, small huge territories for maintaining huge populations, and particularly fixed territories with private owners of the land. This changes everything. This is impossible to manage things with private owners. Thus, and this was one of the strong things that happened. It was the big cultural revolution that began with the urban revolutions. It's the increasing content of information per capita and the increasing content of information, of diversity of information. That means that each people have more information than the information they need for being happy and successful. This was some of the result of these changes. In fact, I am professor of a factory of stupidity because I'm professor in the National University of Cordoba, and I produce clones of mine. That means that my stupidity is transmitted. And this increasing of the adoption of the cultural based principle increased the hazardous effects of such adoption. That means that we are not predictable. The solely way for surviving is to be predictable. And we forgot this. If you live in the forest, it's very important to be in the forest. It's very hard to live in the forest. In the forest, each species and population is predictable. What means predictable? Because most of the species are driven by the genes. But even cultural people where the Neo-Paleo had a lot of cultural information, even them don't have strong variation because the culture in the indigenous group is very strict. This is very important to understand. When you live in an indigenous population, this is not a free one, they're going to take fruits and being happy all the day, singing. This is only for pictures. It's a very strict manner for controlling diversity and amount of information. More information you have in the brains of people, less predictability you will have. The only way for maintaining complex ecosystem is having predictability. If I have species A, I need a species A that is the same all over the time. If not, everything collapses. We changed this. We introduced a new strategy. For being successful, you need to be not predictable. This is crazy. Fixed territory, private property, Apple, and over this, you need particularly to have an increasing size of the niche. And this is the last important element. The niche of each people is increasing each hour of the day. And there is no limits. If you are occupying a niche that is not predictable, but at the same time the size of your niche is increasing, we're in problems. In this moment, Wabia Guarani, my friends working in the forest, they spend 3,000 kilocalories per person per day. A person in New York, 400,000. We made the calculation for Bill Gates. 80 million. He spent, himself, he spent 80 million kilocalories per day. One single person. Something is wrong. It's impossible to make faculties, college, university, schools for teaching people, for developing things, for more producing, for more having money. Because the problem is the limit. It's not the way for obtaining money. Problem is not solely overconsumption, it's also underconsumption. But we cannot solve the problem of underconsumption, increasing and transforming each case of underconsumption in overconsumption. And this was the note I made. I lost everything. When I was talking this morning, some of the things that have been arising. We have projects, we have small groups, people making changes. This is very important, quite important. But the problem is that we have huge populations. If we have solely small projects working with 10,000, 1 million people, it's nothing in terms of huge populations. Thus, one of the big challenges is how to work with this size of citizens, groups, and how to make chain reactions, is how to transform each of these small things in a huge thing. For this reason, in the video we see some small one, when we work with the community, they were menaced by people cutting trees for the industry. But the idea is, okay, the battle is in your hands. We can contribute. In which way we can contribute? We can contribute in transforming your local fight in an international one. That means that you make a change of reactions. You increase. You make an effort 5, but using media, you are making a big changes. Why I say this? Facebook and the spring of the Arab people, the situation in Spain, are very interesting situations. They are showing some new mechanisms of chain reactions. And this kind of chain reactions need to be addressed because we cannot solely produce here people for going to our third world countries for teaching us. No! Totally no. We need the opposite. Europe needs experts for learning here. Please don't help us. This is one of the main problems that we are facing in our countries. We have experts coming, and they come like as gods. They come from the plane. They descend, and they go to see. Ah yes, and we compare situation. I have seen the same in Ethiopia. I have in Gambia a project of this. Yes. Listen me. You make a group, we design something. But what we are designing? We are designing using the prospect and using the pattern of the people, which is in the wrong way. Because the limit is here also. This is not solely the problem of a limit for increasing food or increasing money in the free world. No, sorry. This is not solely the problem. The problem is not solely against poverty. This is not my fight, solely. My fight is against richness. My fight is against people in the north, but not the king or the emperor. They are minor problems. The problem is those people that spend 300,000 kilocalories per day, but in their homes they are handicraft, they make beautiful projects in the third world, and even they make conferences and papers about poverty. Sorry, we need to make a stronger balance. And this balance is that we need not solely process of formation, of educating from north to south, no, sorry, particularly from south to north. Because when I come to the barbarian countries, because for us it's barbarians, I have a lot of friends and it's also and when I come to barbarian countries, I see that everything is clean, green. I have been in the plane looking the forest, and I had a strong discussion with the president of the University of Alliance. You were there. It was a strong discussion. He was very upset with my speech. I don't know this, but later I was convinced of this. In my group, he told me, Raul, you're too pessimistic. Here in Germany, we are reducing the per capita consumption of electricity year by year. We have more and more cleaner rivers. And I told him, sorry, you are wrong. In Germany, because a friend of mine, which is German, is expert in energy, and we talk all the time. In Germany, the per capita consumption on electricity is increasing all the time. This is no period of time where the total amount of electricity was reduced. And I told him, okay, this is not true. You're increasing. But why you have clean rivers? Why you don't have waste? Besides cultural things. Because you have money. Why you have money? Why you have money? The money comes from Germany solely? No. We don't have more German colonies in Africa. No more colonies in Africa. But now we have expanded countries. And Germany is expanded, as is expanded France, United Kingdom, and Argentina. Argentina is expanded over Bolivia, for example. And the expanded country means that you don't have guns, Kalashnikovs. Now you have Bayer, you have Mercedes-Benz, you have companies. They expand, they are pumps obtaining funds for cleaning your rivers, for having forests, and for inviting people, for teaching how to be successful. I know that it's like a shock, these things, but we need this kind of shocks, because these people that live in the forest, they have a lot of lessons for being learned here. And this is a little bit the message, is please don't help us. Try to combine both sides of the story. Because in front of us, we have huge populations, powerful corporations, powerful mafias, powerful militarization, and powerful nations. And the only way for facing this is to have some kind of bridge between source and out. But under these new conditions, we are not teachers, we are not pupils, we are not students. We are both sides. We need the same horizon. And we had a lot of things, but the core message was this. I think it's important to discuss, to exchange totally the issue of development. The word development is one of the most stupid words in the world. Because development is a polluted word. Development means growth. Development don't means balance. You know which are the two most consumed materials in the world? Which are the two most materials used in the world by everybody? First one, water. Second one, cement. Cement is the most used material in the world after water. Which are the countries that most produce? China and India. That means that something is mixed, and we need to make a reanalysis of things. And this is our partial teachers of this. I think that we need to organize the same that we are organizing here is from the other side. You can put this for finishing. We can put this.
Okay.
Because we will see we have been working with these different indigenous groups and citizens all over in my country, in Latin America. We stopped nuclear power plants in Guatemala, in Zimbabwe. We have been working in several places of the world, in the same place. We are not in the front, we are not in the back, we are at the same level. And we are learning. We are not the bosses, we are not the experts. We are working together. And this way needs also a revolution in the mind. Because one of the problems we have is experts. And this is a factory of experts. And we are part of the problem. We are not solely part of the solution. I think we need a totally change of mind for learning that is absolutely impossible to think that we can produce changes with experts. A totally different way of work with citizens need to be put in place. Totally different. Not the expert that knows everything. And if he has some doubt, he goes to Google. No, it's more complex than this.
Should we start?
Yes. Sorry, it's in German because a little bit before. When we worked with the indigenous communities, this is one of our work. This is not our solid work. The solid way for fighting was to make the chain reaction, but not to make the chain reaction in Argentina. Argentina, who knows Argentina? Argentina, Maradona, football. We had the meetings inside the forest. I don't speak BA. It was a very difficult work, but I was adopted by the community because I was like a student. And I told them, you know, we white people, we are bad people, in average, not all the people. But the solid way for producing changes is to go outside Argentina, is to be visible. The solid way for having power is to be in CNN, TV5, BBC, is to manage to visibility. And which are the ways? Media, Facebook, Twitter. These instruments are powerful. I have friends that work in Egypt, and it was not to believe the weight of these instruments. That's the thing that we need also like a workshop for understanding which are the new ways we have for working, because the new revolution is totally different of Che Guevara revolution. We need a different kind of revolution, and it's how to use this instrument, but from the side, from the ground, expert solely for being in this side, but touching them cautiously, because sometimes they are toxic.
So as far as I understood, this is a movie for made in
TV Arte is a channel of television of Germany and France.
Yeah. Therefore, it's in German. It's at French-German broadcaster. Okay.
It was, and this film permitted that the 10,000 hectares of the territory of the Guarani are now closed for the cutting of trees. This was obtained more all over the world than fighting in Argentina.
It's running.
Yes, we see.
Yeah.
This is my car. It's an English one. Yes.
Den Weg zu der Gemeinde Tekoa-Ima in dem Naturreservat Jabuti macht. Bei seinem letzten Besuch hörte man das überall die Motorsägen des Holzunternehmens Mokola Foresta.
This is the Jabuti Reserve. We are going to the community. This is the rainforest. We listened that they were cutting trees.
Raul Montenegro will wissen, wer hier am Sägen ist. Dann der traurige Anblick.
Você é igual,
Yeah. It's a brother. This boy, he received 3 pesos, $1 for each cutted tree. This is Kiki. She's a nun that works in the community. She understands. She's really an hero.
Seit 10 Jahren kämpft auch sie gegen das unaufhörliche Abholzen des Waldes in dem Reservat und begleitet Raul Montenegro jedes Mal zu
Maybe you could, because it's in German, maybe you could
Yes, I will,
moderate it.
yes.
Maybe standing here, that you
Okay.
can.
If not, I will sleep in this.
Dann
Ja.
Montenegro wissen, für wen sie arbeiten.
We are talking with him, and he was transmitting the prize that he received.
Im Durchschnitt fällt 10 pro Tag, sagt er. Wir sind überrascht, dass er so offen vor der Kamera mit uns spricht. Für sie ist es eben nur eine Arbeit, wie jeder andere auch.
This was the first time that we were in contact with him. You see, this is a book. This is the temple of the community.
Bei der Gemeinde Tekoa-Ima. Seit über einem Jahr haben sich der Häuptling Artemio
This is Artemio. He is the chief and the Obiwa, the shaman. His wife.
Team Beweis, der alternative Nobelpreisträger, gehört zu den Weißen, die zerstört wurden. Die Neuigkeit, die uns erzählt, stürzen seit sich hier.
Can you increase the volume? Okay.
It will get damaged.
In this, in fact, it was that the journalists of TV Arte, we agreed with Artemio, which is the chief, to arrive with the cameras, and because they know that it was the way for obtaining success outside. The solid condition that Artemio told us that they could make some views of the community, but solely some kind of views. They cannot go all over the community taking recording.
Seit über 3000 Jahren leben sie als Jäger und Sammler.
This community live particularly of gathering in the forest. They use more than 150 medicinal plants.
Der Sohn des Häuptlings, wie sich die Natur in den letzten 9 Monaten erholt hat. Ein erfreulicher Anblick für Raul Montenegro. Vor einem Jahr erstellte er eine wissenschaftliche Studie
This side is a site we use it for identifying these different medicinal plants. They are showing us one of the plants for being used. This plant is used for linking the different elements when you make a house. I learned this from them. This is the community, and we are explaining which is the functioning of the community. And there is some tragedies that we explain that, when the children born in these communities, they don't have names. During 2 or 3 years, they are children, no names. This is also a medicinal plant. We make a record of all the medicinal plants.
Ausschließlich zu medizinischen Zwecken genutzt. Doch viele von ihnen sind längst durch das Holzunternehmen bedroht.
Even we made this list and we introduced this list as a property of the community. And this ceremony of the names, the Opiwa in the temples, he think, and the names of the children arrive to his mind. And this is a ceremony where the Opiwa provide the names of the children. We are talking that the mortality is very low in the community. All the infant mortality is very small comparing with people living in the cities 200 or 300 kilometers outside. This is a monte trap for trapping big animals. This is a very complex system. You need to have a special organization for visiting all the traps because animals could be decomposed. This is all the area of the temple. In the communities of the Webia Guarani, women and men have the same power. Even if women are not chiefs or opiwas, they are more relative power than men. And they decide most of the things.
Aber jetzt bringen sie wieder zu essen aus dem Wald, ohne Angst zu haben.
And the most important thing is that when you make the analysis from the scope of people of a city, you perceive that they are poor people, and this is a stupidity too. The concept of poverty is a wrong concept. There is no one solely kind of poverty. And this is not poverty. This is a defined way of living. This is one of the ways of communication.